What if I told you that today's guest has spent their career fighting two of America's biggest battles, I believe, inside the classroom and inside the courtroom? And now she believes that neither can be truly fixed without changing Congress itself. You are here on From Dirt We Grow with your host, Stephanie Allen. I have a huge question. Can government still serve the people, or has it become too disconnected from the lives of everyday Americans? So stick with me. We're going to get into that and much, much more with Miss Laura Dunn, running for Congress in New York's 12th District. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Stephanie. It touched my heart that you reached out and offered this opportunity to me. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for being here, as I said. And I know your time is valuable. So, first, obviously, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you?
So, I'm Laura Dunn. I'm a civil rights attorney. I'm currently running for Congress in NY12, that is Manhattan. That race is coming up June 23rd. And my background, I came to politics from a very unusual route. I've been very public about being a survivor of campus sexual violence. And that life experience really showed me that institutions often fail the people they are meant to help. We know the criminal justice system does not sufficiently take reports or investigate or prosecute sexual violence. That's why it's so normative still. And when I realized that from personal experience, I spoke out. I shared my name, face, and story with the public. I went to Capitol Hill during President Obama's term. I lobbied a bipartisan Congress going into Democratic and Republican offices alike, sharing my experiencing and advocating for what became the 2013 Violence Against Women Act, which has made college campuses safer across the country. And because of that experience, I went on, I became a civil rights attorney. There was a brief time I also, as you mentioned, was a public school teacher. After undergrad and before law school, I actually did Teach for America, and I went to post Hurricane Katrina New Orleans, taught for 2 years. And what was very interesting about that experience is while local schools are normally controlled by kind of the local government, in this case, the federal government had taken over the schools because No Child Left Behind had really defunded a lot of programs, and New Orleans had some of the worst schools in the entire nation. So the federal government had taken it over. Then a hurricane happened, and a disaster that left people without school for 3 years in the United States. And I was the first group of teachers to come back in, and I saw the federal government fail, put in bad policies, procedures. And the reason they failed was they didn't understand New Orleans. They didn't understand the culture. They didn't go to the people closest to the solutions, which are always the people experiencing the problems on the ground. So I've had a lot of experiences in my life really understanding federal law and policy, and that continued when I became a civil rights attorney. I founded the national nonprofit Serve Justice, and through that have won the 2017 AAUW Roosevelt Eleanor Roosevelt Fund Award, and also the 2017 DOJ Special Courage Award, because I represented survivors all across the country. I even sued Donald Trump in his first term in office when he tried to roll back protections for students who have experienced sexual violence. So I've really kind of done a variety of things to prepare myself for running for office.
I'd say, that was a lot. You kind of answered a lot of my questions too in that snippet. I don't know if there's anything else to, no, I'm just kidding.
Well, we can go deeper, I promise you that.
Yes, we need to get deep, don't we? Speaking of, what are some root issues that we just don't address? I feel like we slap band-aids on everything. What are some of your core policies?
Yeah. So I've named my three kind of buckets of policy focuses: accountability, affordability, and advancement. So accountability is the things that drive every American, no matter their party, absolutely insane, which is the lack of congressional term limits. Why are people holding seats decades after decade, dying in office, and failing to bring up the next generation? That's just unacceptable. We need to have leaders that match the demographics of the community they serve. And it's really important for any political party, Democrat or Republican, to bring up the next generation of leaders. And that's not possible if you stay in and die in your seat. So I'm really happy that Representative Jerry Nadler, who had been in the seat for 34 years, chose to gracefully retire rather than face younger challengers against him as an incumbent. And the other thing that drives American nuts is this insider trading. We see Congress members becoming multimillionaires. I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars have been made by Speaker Pelosi, and she's done great things for the Democratic Party, but she's also harmed its reputation. You should not be using insider information that is unique to people just about to pass laws and work with different lobbying groups to make money off of it. That's unacceptable on Wall Street. It needs to be unacceptable on Capitol Hill. And I'm really proud of AOC and other leaders who've already started to put forward legislation to close this loophole that advantages people who allegedly are public servants and should be serving the public interest. And the third in my bucket of accountability is ethical standards to the Supreme Court. There's been a lot of questions about kind of political corruption, especially with the latest Trump appointees, about who they're serving. The shadow docket of the Supreme Court, now that it's kind of been opened up, really shows that corporate interests are shaping Supreme Court decisions, and that's very terrifying. We have quite a few judges who have gotten private gifts, like souped up tour buses. I know Justice Thomas has his mother living in a home purchased and owned by a billionaire who regularly has cases come before the Supreme Court. There's no lawyer in this entire country that could get away with that level of corruption. But oddly, the very top of our profession doesn't. And that's the fault of Congress. They need to do their job. So that's just the accountability. Let's talk about affordability, everyone's favorite topic. We need to be able to live wherever you are. You want to afford in New York City. We all know the prices are crazy. It's getting worse and worse. There's something between hustling and being ripped off, and we're in the ripped off category right now. So I want to fight for universal health care and start with catastrophic coverage. To me, Medicare for all doesn't really mean anything. It's just a slogan. There's no start point. How do we know when we're done? With universal catastrophic coverage, we can make sure that all Americans are protected against bankruptcy if they suffer illness or injury. And that, I know, is something Republicans will agree with me on. It's a good start point. It creates a universal safety net, and we can build from there until we have what literally every developed country in the entire world has, which is universal health care. The next is affordable housing. We have a massive housing crisis in New York City. Other people are getting priced out of their cities around this country. That's because private equity is starting to buy up homes and has no business either in housing or healthcare. They're driving up prices and leaving people behind. And it's also just because we don't have sufficient federal funding supporting the agenda of making sure cities are affordable to live in. So I've proposed changing funding. I want it locally driven rather than a bunch of DCists deciding if they want to build housing somewhere else. We need to have every dollar that New York City and state puts in matched 1-to-1 by the federal government. That way we can have local advocacy driving the housing that we need. And I'm definitely going to support Mayor Mamdani in his City of Yes program that will build 80,000 new units in the city. The last but not least in affordability is changing the tax code. I just had a woman on the street while I was campaigning earlier today just absolutely show her frustration with people are not paying their fair share. We haven't changed the tax code. It's getting worse. And she didn't have a lot of hope. She's in her 60s. And I have a lot of hope as a millennial. We need the next generation to step up. The next generation has suffered under all these financial policies. We're the ones to fix them. So I want an equalized tax code. Everyone pays their fair share. And if you're below the cost of living for where you are, whether that's New York City or the middle of Kansas, you should not have to pay any taxes. We want people who can afford to give back to this society, and we want people who are struggling to make ends meet not burdened unnecessarily. And that requires us to tax wealth, not just work. And last but not least is advancement. So we definitely know AI companies are coming. They're replacing jobs. They're replacing workers. They're doing terrifying things. And we know that AI cannot be controlled by the companies that have even created them. So we need consumer protection to be at the core. I'm proposing a moratorium and new standards put in place, something called the precautionary principle. Now, I know that's a little jargony. In Europe, If someone wants to put a product into society, they first must prove it's safe. We don't have that in the United States. And the benefit of not having that is we have a lot of innovation, people get to market sooner, and we've created a lot of wealth. The downside is class actions. People get bad products that cause massive harm, and we have a lot of litigation and lawsuits. So, for AI especially, I want innovators to have to put forward that they have ethical standards, proper guide rails, and sufficient insurance to cover harm should their product create it before we let them go to market. I also want to make sure that crypto is being regulated. We have significant standards and regulations on Wall Street so that people can't manipulate stocks in that market. We just need the same thing in crypto, but we don't have it. So we've seen meme coin schemes by Donald Trump, by Eric Adams, and that's unacceptable. It's basically becoming a pocket of dark money, and it's been around for 15 years. So even if you don't like crypto, I hate to break it to you, it's here to stay. It's being traded 24/7 by the New York Stock Exchange. So it's time to bring it up to market standards and have it be a safe product for consumers who choose to invest in that area. And last but not least is something maybe some of your listeners have not heard of. It's quantum computing. We think AI is the big boogeyman. Wait and see. Quantum computing is the idea of super powered computers that can do calculations that would take a normal computer days, weeks, hours, months, and can do it in seconds, minutes, hours. What that will mean practically for society is our encryption systems will be broken. We know that this is coming. We're investing at the federal government level in what we call post encryption cryptography, which is like a new alternative to our encryption systems. But then Donald Trump fired all those federal employees, and that's a cybersecurity risk for our entire nation. So we need to invest in research. We need to be innovators leading in the quantum computing space, both to protect and find new encryption systems, but also importantly, to make sure that when this technology comes, we're prepared about how to safely integrate it into society. Because once you put AI and quantum computing, it's going to be much, much more challenging.
I mean, it sounds a bit terrifying, the end there. Yeah, all the AI. I mean, we know it's out there. We know it's coming. We know we're going to lose jobs. The quantum computing you're talking about sounds a little terrifying, and that's scary because and it's that scary in itself, but it's also scary that we don't know about these things. They're not putting. What do we do about media?
Yeah, well, what's really crazy about the media right now, we have traditional media and new media. And so for traditional media, we know that one kind of owner is buying up company after company, and so many of them are bending the knee to Donald Trump. He doesn't like a comedian. He threatens through the FCC, and then all of a sudden, that comedian's job is being threatened, their show's being canceled. This is the sign of fascism. A lot of people, in New York City tell me they're tired of hearing about Trump. They just want the party to move on. We can't. We can't forget the lessons of World War II. There are horrible leaders that come into countries and destroy their governments, destroy their economies, and make them unsafe for massive amounts of the population. And that's what's happening here. When people can't speak their mind, we are losing our democracy because this is the First Amendment. It's the most important. So the consolidation, the bending the knee, the threats to the fascist government that's being created, all that is terrifying. Thankfully, we have new media, but there's still some problems there. So I just want to give a quick shout out to Courier News and Midas Touch. They did a New York 12 debate. It's online. People should go watch it and see the top 6 candidates in this race. It's the only one that included me, even though I met the debate criteria of 5%. And all 2 other local media companies that excluded me from debates are private equity owned. They are part of this corporate money going into this race to 2 of the establishment candidates. So they're trying to basically steal the election from people by choosing who people see and don't see. And that is so antithetical to the goals of the First Amendment, to the goals of our democracy. But the challenge with new media is we have a lot of influencers that take money that you would not know about. I met with a Jewish comedian who has a lovely Instagram following, and he was telling me how he was approached by the state of Israel to do messaging on its behalf, and he refused it, but he knew other influencers that were taking it. So there is money coming from foreign governments and other disreputable sources going to people we think are being objective, and there's no way for the public to know that they're not public entities, they're private citizens. So if they take money, you're not going to hear about it, but you will hear their corrupted messages. So there's so much going on in media. And actually, I think the attack on media really was the first sign that we are in danger in our democracy today.
Wow. It's scary. I mean, I'm wondering what keeps your hope alive that we can still have meaningful change in America? How do we go back? And not even go back to how it was, but reverse any of this at all.
Yeah, no, I love that you basically you started answering the way I love to answer, which is it's not about going back, it's about doing it better. It wasn't
Yeah.
that great before. And now that the middle class is under attack, now that the rich are becoming uber rich and oligarchs, like we're feeling that pressure. So what we need to build back needs to be better. And that's why I really want to use this as an opportunity for what I call a second civil rights era. We actually have a pre-existing proposal of a second Bill of Rights, and that would make education a right, voting a right, healthcare a right, housing a right. This may sound wild to some people who are so used to our democracy where we have not ensured access to any of those things. But there are countries all across the world that are just as developed or even slightly less developed than our country that actually have rights for not only these issues, but for example, the environment. South Africa has that. And what the value of having a second civil rights area, of passing a new constitutional right to protect our environment, to ensure the vote, a lot of these corrupting influences that make our daily lives unaffordable and tenuous are things we can change. Imagine if every child had access to the best education and we couldn't have what we have now, which is discriminatory funding. Kids in rich neighborhoods have better public schools or go to private schools. Kids in lower resourced area have worse education. And then those kind of differences from day one of education continue on into later life and make it hard for people to have economic parity. Imagine if we could actually stop environmental pollution because we had constitutional rights for the environment to be protected. Imagine if what just happened with the Voters' Rights Act, where it was gutted and all of a sudden all these states in the South destroyed black districts to make quote unquote Republican districts that are, of course, deeply white and meant to dilute the minority vote. Imagine if that was unlawful at the basis of our Constitution. So I picture a world that's so much better that we have now and even before. But what you're going to need to see and what all your listeners need to vote for and donate for is young, brave leaders who say the tough thing out loud, that aren't taking APAC money, that aren't taking AI or crypto money. And it's really, really hard to run a campaign without hundreds of millions today. But even that can be changed. We can amend Citizens United, but we need people like me who ran campaigns without taking that money to be the brave ones taking that stand in Congress.
I want to kind of talk about it. A big thing for me, and I know for a lot of people, is and since you have firsthand experience of it, I'm sure you saw a lot of what went down in the justice system, if you want to call it that. I can't believe we still do. What reforms would you prioritize within the criminal justice system?
Yeah, well, I've stopped calling it a justice system. I call it the criminal system. It's just
Mm.
as much criminal as anything else, and there's so many failures in that. So what the big challenge is criminal law is largely state specific. It is one of the areas that our Constitution leaves for states to govern on their own. So the federal government has a very limited role, but it has a very important one. What federal government has always done is been able to issue guidance and direct funding and set objectives. So something that President Obama did right at the end of his term in 2015, I believe, he issued a U.S. Department of Justice special report about gender bias within law enforcement and prosecution, and why, whether it's crimes against women like gender violence or crimes against the LGBTQ community have gone so under investigated and under prosecuted. And it laid out all the steps that could be done to address this. And that is something that we can pick up and run with now. So we definitely see a lot of issues, whether it's bail reform, which is keeping poor people in prison even though they have not yet been prosecuted. If it's, you were talking about the criminal system, but I'm going to add in a separate legal system, which is our immigration system. We're seeing violations of due process. We literally have probably 2/3 of the immigrants that Donald Trump had detained were people on their way or in court trying to lawfully become residents and or citizens, and they were arrested in that process in front of families, literally stripped from spouses and children. And it was horrifying. It still is. And these are people who also have been tracked because they paid taxes. So we have a whole population present in the United States, and you may not be happy that they came here without lawful authorization, but that's a civil offense. It's not a criminal offense. And we should be giving pathways to citizenship. So if you pay taxes for a certain amount of time, you should be able to buy your way into citizenship. If you do military service, because we have absolutely detained and deported people who served in our own military on behalf of the United States because of their immigration status, they should have gotten citizenship through that service. If you come here, you complete a degree, you're contributing to society, these are the people we want. We are a nation of immigrants. Unless you're First Nations, unless you're native to this land, unless you're in that category, you are a product of immigration. And you have to remember that, and we should be grateful and create appropriate pathways. But what Donald Trump is doing violates due process, it violates human rights law, and the very few criminals that were, in fact, swept up in those raids, those are people that could have been gone after without destroying entire communities and populations like we saw in Minneapolis.
Thank you for addressing that. I was going to ask you where you stand on immigration, but I do know now. So so thank you. Yeah. One I ask everybody this that comes on the show. It's so important. We know that we don't trust our politicians, and we know why. There's no trust left. How do we trust, or why should we trust you?
Oh, that's amazing questions, and I really appreciate you asking them. So, what is lovely about the path that I chose to get to this position where I'm now running for Congress is it's all public. I'm not someone like an Alex Borez who worked for Palantir, who empowered ICE to commit the atrocities. I am someone whose life and story has been documented because I came out as a public survivor in undergrad, and then I became this national advocate, and I did it publicly, and articles were written about everything I said and that I've done. So people can go to lauraldunn.com and literally read every article that's ever been published over the last decade about my work. And what people have reflected back to me is when they meet me, when they talk to me, or even when they like watch on YouTube the different debates, they know that I'm not pulling any punches, I'm not mincing any words, and I'm speaking from my heart. When I am side by side with the traditional politicians, I'll give you one example. We were just in a synagogue on Monday. One of the leading candidates in this district is part of that community. His name is Michael Lasher. I am not part of the Jewish community, but I am part of civil rights, and there is a strong contingency of the Jewish community who have historically and continue to defend civil rights in the US. So these are my colleagues. And so we're sitting side by side, and we're asked a question about the definition of anti Semitism as proposed by the Holocaust Remembrance Society. And when they went to Micah for the answer, he said, I don't really want to pick a definition. All it does is divide us. I'm not going to define it, blah, blah, blah. He basically passed. And it came to me, and I said out loud what everyone in that room was thinking, which is, isn't it a shame when politicians don't have the courage to answer the questions the public needs to know? And I went on to say, as a civil rights attorney, it's literally my job to define what is or is not anti Semitism. I literally go into courts and I do that every single day. So I talked about what I liked about the definition and what I didn't like. There are definitely parts that very much protect against hatred towards the Jewish community, and those were valuable, but it went too far. And certain parts of it inhibited political speech that criticizes the government of Israel, and that was too far. That's actually counter to our First Amendment. So I was able to have a meaningful discussion where other politicians didn't want to choose sides. They wanted to stay in the middle and not let the public know what they really thought. And I had someone challenge me the other day on the street. He was very anti Israel. He doesn't even want Israel to have funding for the Iron Dome, which is defensive and protects civilians from attack. And when he was kind of talking to me, and I was saying, I'm not going to let citizens get killed. I don't care if those citizens are in Gaza, Lebanon, Iran, or Israel. It doesn't matter. We should not be supporting the killing of citizens. That's a violation of international law and human rights. He said, well, don't you want my vote? And I said, no, I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you who I am, and you decide if you want to vote for me.
Wouldn't it be great if every politician was like that? We wouldn't be in this mess maybe in the first place, or at least not this deep. That's the thing, it's everything. It's every single thing, or we're a little overwhelmed, I feel like, at the moment. Every single system, education, healthcare, immigration, every single thing is broken. How do we not, or running as designed, but
Yeah.
where, uh, how do we, what message would you have for the people that are feeling overwhelmed and hopeless?
Yeah, you've again already hinted at the right answer, which is this is by design. And some of
Mhm.
it's by neglect, right? So the part that's by design is, and you can tell, and maybe some of your listeners fall on the political spectrum, I'm very anti Trump. He is not a Republican, he's his own category. I think he has violated our Constitution numerous times. And as a lawyer, that's something I would effectively be prosecuting in Congress, moving to impeach him. And I won't let that stand. Our nation is built on the Constitution, it's the basis of our democracy. So he has made himself, as far as I'm concerned, a domestic enemy of our nation. But the parts that are by design, we can absolutely fix that. We can stop the massive dismantlement of a federal government that was intentionally put in place to respond to natural disasters, incoming threats like quantum computing, environmental disasters that no one has the money to prosecute. Like, there's a reason the federal government exists. I know people are so tired of the tax burden that they think it would be better to dismantle systems and save money. I promise you it's not. Russia and China are our enemies. If we are ever attacked, we will need federal agencies to rebuild, repair, defend in the first place. So we shouldn't be so desperate to save money that we dismantle our own protections. Some of it is by neglect. I really blame not just the Republican, but very much the Democratic establishment party for becoming corrupt. They have taken corporate money, they have stayed in their seats too long, they were too busy doing stock trades to care about the affordability crisis that's been happening for many years before Donald Trump even came into office the second term. So there's a lot going on. And I think the way we avoid that is that accountability platform. I think when we put the guardrails that should have always been put in place, and used to be just part of the respect of the system rather than the law of the system, when we put that into place, we're going to get better leaders. And I will tell you, as someone who, has only raised hundreds of thousands in a race where there's hundreds of millions, I am absolutely going to do everything in my power to dismantle Citizens United and put better protections in around the equal time rule. So we're here, but the audience, you're going to have to do a little legwork. You can't just be like, oh, who's in the New York Times? You're going to have to look on social media. You're going to have to look up your ballots. You're going to have to look at every person, find their websites, read their stuff, watch their YouTubes, and not let corporate influenced media tell you who to vote for.
Yeah, so that's exactly what we have to do. We have to do the work for ourselves. So, New York 12, June 23rd, you said?
Yes, that is the primary.
Share this episode and get the message out there. And like Miss Dunn said, check out people. We got to do the work for ourselves. Is there anything else we need to know about you, Miss Dunn?
Oof. Well, if you want just fun facts about me, this is a little known fact. I ride in an all women's social justice Mardi Gras crew once a year. It's called Crew of Themis. And we do not throw plastic beads. We have recycled or glass beads that we throw because we care about the environment. Outside of all the very, very serious work I do, I have fun giving back to my community. And I used to live in New Orleans. So I go back once a year and make sure I keep giving back and participating in the south of the US, because I think too often we think of places like New York, DC, and the south is just as much a part of the US as anywhere else.
That sounds amazing. That sounds like fun. I don't know how you have time, but
Yeah, there's not a lot of time, but it's what you put as your priorities. And there's something about a community, and I think people have a bad stereotype of Mardi Gras, like the flashing, all that stuff. That's what tourists do in the French Quarter. It's actually a community event, and it's over a week long. and it's families, and they come out and they tailgate, and the parades during the day, hand out stuffed animals to kids. It's really, really beautiful to see an entire community choose joy and play and happiness. And to your point about overwhelm, disengagement, lack of trust, one of the ways to counteract that is to remember there is beauty in this world, there is joy, and it's very accessible when you're in your community and of your community.
That's true. We do need to find those moments because they're so few and far between, more recently than ever, especially. But yeah, hold on to them and seek them out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure. And if I may, if people want to learn more, lauradunnforcongress.com. That's the source of most of the information. I also have YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. I'm a lot of places.
Just Google any politicians and see where their funding is coming from. I don't know how accurate it is,
Yeah,
but I know that there are sites out there available.
fec.gov is the official site. That's the government site. So we report every quarter, and at the end, we report for the month. So people can literally go and click and see the entire list of donors, all the PAC money. What it won't show you is super PACs. That's the dark money that's there. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, thank you for that. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time and your voice, and of course, your efforts for as far as for what you're doing for us. So thank you.
Of course, thank you, Stephanie. Thanks for creating an outlet for candidates like me to speak, for people to learn about us. You're doing your part for our democracy, and I appreciate you so deeply.
Thank you. I'm trying. I'm trying to get the word out there. It's so important. So everybody make sure please again share this episode and be sure to join us again next week right here on From Dirt We Grow.